Hello, you beautiful wizards. I'm the Mana Dork, and today we're going to be asking the question, what are the best blue commanders in Magic the Gathering? As with each of our best of lists, we're taking a look at how popular a deck is, its competitive viability, and general commentary on what to play with each commander. Kicking off our list, we have Bruvak the Grandiloquent from Jumpstart. His usual price range averages around $20 for a copy, and has managed to steadily drop about 50% in value over the last 12 months. The reason why he costs about an hour's worth of labor is because this guy is the top tier mono blue equivalent to the Mill Lord. This chunky little bugger here doubles the potency of every single mill card that you can get your grubby little fingers on. But because he's one color, you are quite restricted from being able to take advantage of cards like Crypt Incursion, Mnemonic Betrayal, and Mind Grind. However, that isn't to say that you'll be lacking in a decent toolbox of cards to annoy your opponents with. Bruvak and his 1,276 decks pairs best with milling recursion engines such as Sphinx's Tutelage, Patient Rebuilding, and Memory Erosion. Some other great cards to play with him are milling all-stars like Maddening Cacophony, Fractured Sanity, and Traumatize, with the latter half being potent enough to end games all by itself. You could even be so cunning as to jam your deck chock full of cards like Persistent Petitioners to really grind your opponent's patience down to zero. Next, let's take a look at Emry, Lurker of the Law. At 1,893 decks, and at costing an affordable 95 cents, this interesting little merfolk wizard from Throne of Eldraine wants you to play the best self-milling strategy that you can in order to bring all sorts of artifacts back into play. As something of an affinity for artifacts herself, she's a pretty easy commander to wrap your head around, so long as you're willing to take the risk against graveyard hate. She is quite small, and isn't going to be much in combat other than a chump blocker, but if everything plays out in your favor, you may not ever have to worry about a commander tax. Emry pairs best with other permanents that care about you playing artifacts, such as Mirren Spy, Riddlesmith, and Sai Master Thopterist. She's also quite fond of cards that synergize best with artifacts in the graveyard, such as Secrets of the Dead and the game-ending Mirrodin Besieged. Next up on our list, we have the biggest Drake fan on the planet, that being Talrand's Sky Summoner. At 2,148 decks, this all-star has managed to hold on to blue players' hearts for nearly a decade now, all the way back since M13. Because this merfolk wizard has been reprinted into the ground, you'll be hard-pressed to find a copy that's more than 25 cents, and realistically, you can build a solid deck around him for probably under $30, $40, or maybe even $50 at the max. Talrand here is a bit of a lush for instant and sorcery spells, so most players just end up playing exclusively cantrips and counter spells, with the hopes that they can pester their opponents into conceding. And even if your opponents manage to get rid of your Talrand for the third or the fourth time, you can always windmill slam something like a Murmuring Mystic to just really deflate the room of any leftover fun that may have been left hanging around. Talrand pairs best with payoff cards like Favorable Winds, Jace's Sanctum, and Archmage Emeritus. As far as what to put in the deck, you can't go wrong with cheap spells like Opt, Pongify, and Think Twice. But be warned, playing this commander will more than likely uninvite you from further casual games of Magic. At number 2 on our list, with 3,963 decks, we look into Orville the All-Form. Orville here has wicked cool art, and like Talrand, wants you to play spells, albeit in a much less annoying fashion. At just over $3, Orville here is surprisingly affordable for a mythic rare from Kaldheim, which is on its way out of rotation here pretty soon. This commander here with fair stats wants you to play not only spells, but ones that target your creatures. This is affectionately referred to as a quote-unquote disco ball effect, where targeting something of yours tends to reflect back onto your board for some sort of advantage. Think of cards like Zada Hedron Grinder when building around this deck. Orville decks are probably some of the most unique blue decks that you can find these days, as some of the best cards to pair it with would be some very under the radar cards like Shipwreck Dowser, Twisted Image, Shadow Rift, Mind Games, and Thermal Flux. Before we get to number 1, let's go over some honorable mentions that still manage to keep players' attentions. Baral, Chief of Compliance, is the perfect accessory to other commanders like Talrand or Orville, and while this card can be an engine in of itself, Baral here has difficulties with being able to close out games consistently. Octavia Living Thesis is an 8/8 octopus that costs 10 mana, and if we're being petty, I'd have condemned this card by rejecting the cohesion of being an 8 mana creature that's, well, focused around being an octopus. However, at having Ward 8, and with making other small dudes into 8/8s, I'll let this transgression slide. Azami, Lady of Scrolls, used to be at the top of this list for a long period of time, and for good reason. Whether or not you're playing Wizard Tribal, you can't deny that her ability can get quickly out of hand if she's left unchecked. And for the last of our honorable mentions, we have Braid's Conjurer Adept. This here is the peace offering commander that you should pilot after playing something like Talrand or our number one choice, because even though you can't break her ability, the charity benefits that you can get from letting your opponents play more of their stuff may actually qualify as a tax write-off. Finally, at our number one spot with 4,102 decks, we're showcasing the penultimate villain of Magic, that being Urza, Lord High Artificer. Not only a villain in terms of lore, as Urza, a $60 Modern Horizons mythic, dominates not just the modern metagame, but also every kitchen table across the world. While abusing flicker and bouncing effects to create beefy construct tokens is great and all, the real kicker comes from the second ability, which essentially makes you something of an affinity for artifact scientist yourself, as you suddenly have more mana than Elon Musk has money to burn. The cherry on top is that final ability, which is just a fun way of playing with your food, as I personally have never seen such an unnecessary quote-unquote win more effect in the game. Daddy Urza here pairs best with cards like Dramatic Reversal, Tezzeret the Seeker, and Back to Basics, because when you play him, let's be honest here, you play to win. He's also a huge fan of cards like Isochron Scepter, Winter Orb, and Sensei's Divining Top. And that, my friends, concludes this video of the premier blue commanders in Magic the Gathering. Which of these look interesting to you? And I swear if you pick Talrand or Urza, you're no longer my friend. As always, I'm the Mana Dork, you all have been wonderful, and I'll catch you on the flip side.